If you're sitting on the right-hand side of the truck, watch your hands, arms, feet, and legs. Doors are sliding closed. Thank you. Shalom, friends. My name is Katie, and I will be your safari guide into the Harambe Wildlife Reserve. But before we enter the reserve today, I just ask that you please remain seated at all times with your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the truck. It's going to be very bumpy out there on the reserve, so make sure to hold on to any and all loose items, including those cell phones and cameras, but I recommend having them out and ready. Now, this first area we are entering is called the Little Aturi Forest, and it's known for some pretty shy and reclusive animals who are excellent with camouflage. So while we're here, really be on the lookout in those leaves and trees. Starting with the right beside us on the right-hand side of the truck is an okapi. Now, the okapi does have zebra-like stripes on its legs, but it is not related to a zebra. Its closest relative is a giraffe, and very similar to a giraffe, it's got that long prehensile tongue. Now, its tongue is actually so long it could go ahead and lick its own eyeballs, which is wild. Now, over on the left-hand side of the truck, just on top of the hill, there is a saddle-bill stork, named after the yellow saddle shape found just on top of its beak there. It's actually quite tall, about 5 feet, with a wingspan of 9 feet wide. So 5 feet tall is about where we're sitting in this truck, and 9 feet wide is about the size of the canopy just on top of your heads. The best way to tell the males and the females apart, because they do look identical, is by their eye color. Males will have brown eyes and females will have light yellow eyes. Over on the left-hand side of the truck, if you do look on top of the hill here, we're going to get a little bit closer. There is a black rhino there. So in the very far back corner, laying against these rocks, that rhino is about 2,000 to 3,000 pounds in this very far back corner here. Black rhinos do gallop at speeds of 30 miles an hour, so they can gallop very, very similar to a horse. On the left-hand side of the truck are two animals. This orange-colored animal, those tilted back horns, is the bongo, and just behind them are the greater kudos, the tan-colored animal. Now, they both do have those white lines on their back that reflect the sunlight off of them, making them easily camouflaged and harder to be spotted out by their predators. As for the bongo, they do have, the males and the females both have those tilted back horns. The way to tell the males and females apart are by their fur color. The males would be a darker shade of orange. It does look like we're exiting out of the Little Aturi Forest and entering the Safi River. Now, the Safi River is known for some more aquatic animals, so really be on the lookout in the water this time. Look for any ripples or bubbles in the water. Some larger animals do spend some time hanging out in this water here. Outside the water on the right-hand side of the truck are some gray-colored animals. Now, these are pinkback pelicans, and they do get pink backs around mating season, kind of like they're naturally blushing. Those really large gullers do help them store a ton of fish, very similar to a fish net. They'll store all of that water in there, store all that fish there, strain out some of that water, and then swallow those fish entirely whole. On the right-hand side, you might have caught a glance of the hippos back there, but you might want to look over to the left-hand side because you might get a better view of this float here. So a group of hippos is called a float. That does normally contain 10 to 15 hippos, but it can have upwards of 100. Hippos do spend most of their time fully submerged underwater and will subconsciously come up for air every several minutes. Hippopotamus in Latin does mean river horse, and they get that name because they do not always swim. Sometimes they move trotting along the bottom of the water that they are found in, so really pay attention to the bottom of the water there just in case. Hippos do weigh roughly the size of your car, so anywhere between 2,000 to 5,000 pounds, and they are very, very large. I do see a mini float over in the corner on the left-hand side of the truck. You can kind of see the brown of their back in there, kind of hanging out underneath that waterfall there. Don't entirely blame them. I would love to be underneath that water as well. But keep looking on the left-hand side because I do see a Nile crocodile right beside us. You can kind of see most of its body submerged underwater and the top of its head there. Now, Nile crocodiles are really good with camouflage. So while we go over this bridge, double check that those logs are actually logs. The one I see is on the left-hand side. You might be able to catch its tail end on the far left-hand corner. Nile crocodiles are quite long. They're about 16 feet long, so that does mean that if you were to stand them up from the bottom of their tail to the top of their snout, that is roughly the height of a giraffe. And on really hot days, they will lay outside the water with their mouth open. Now, this is a way for them to release all that heat from their body and cooling down their body temperatures. In case you're wondering, crocodiles only need to eat one meal per week, and that's because they can eat half their body weight in food. It's quite impressive. Over here on the right-hand side of the track, this tree might look a little familiar to you. This is called a baobab tree, but you might know it by its nickname, the Tree of Life. Now, this tree does go leafless about 9 months out of the year, so most of the year there's no leaves on top of this tree. And it can store thousands of gallons of water in its trunk. So that's very beneficial for the tree itself, but also for some of the animals in the savanna during the dry months. During those dry months, animals in the savanna can grab hold of the bottom of the tree bark there in order to get easier access to some water. But with that baobab tree, that does mean we are entering the savanna. Now, this is one of my favorite ecosystems. Here you're going to see some animals that you know and love. So be on the lookout, starting in this open area on the right-hand side of the truck. On the right-hand side of the truck, this large animal that kind of looks like a cow with really long horns is called the Ankole cattle. In some cultures, they are seen as a status symbol or a symbol of wealth. Although those horns look really heavy, they are actually quite light. They do have a honeycomb-like structure there in the middle that does regulate their body temperatures. Now, those horns from tip to tip are anywhere between 4 to 6 feet in length, so they are very, very long horns. Coming up here on the left-hand side of the truck are two animals. You see the tan animal that's really small with the white underbellies. Those are the springbok. They're the smallest antelope out here on the reserve. And they can jump at 9 feet vertically, 13 feet horizontally. This is called pronking. They do this when they're scared or excited. Someone said the other day that they kind of look like marshmallows, which I think is really fun. But just past them on the top of the hill there with the dark brown fur and those tilted back horns are the sable antelope. Now, the sable antelope, those tilted back horns serve as a protection for them. So if a predator hops on their back, all they have to do is tilt those horns back to keep them safe. The males are going to be a darker shade of brown, almost like a black, while the females are going to be that dark brown shade. So that's the best way to tell them apart because they both do have those horns. Surrounding us on the right and the left-hand side of the truck are some termite mounds. These sand-like structures all around us. Termite mounds are made out of termite dung, saliva, and soil. Larger animals like the Maasai giraffe use these as scratching posts, while smaller animals are going to go to the very tops of these mounds in order to get a better vantage point of their predators. On the left-hand side of the truck are some Harambe mountain zebras. So once we get a little bit closer, pay attention to their stomachs. You might notice they do not have stripes all the way around their stomachs. That's how we can tell them apart from other types of zebras. Now, this right here is a dazzle, so a group of zebras is called a dazzle. Baby zebras are actually up and walking an hour after being born, and they'll memorize the stripe patterns on their moms to find them in those really large dazzles. But just past this dazzle here on the left-hand side of the truck are some Maasai giraffes. So the one laying down there is a baby Maasai giraffe, about 5 months old. Kind of hard to tell, but babies do start off at 5 to 6 feet tall when born. Giraffes do give birth standing up, so it's quite a fall for that baby when born. And fully grown adult Maasai giraffes are anywhere between 16 to 20 feet tall. On the right-hand side of the truck is the largest antelope out here on the reserve, and that is the eland, this tan-colored animal here. munching on that grass. Now the eland, both the males and the females, both do have those twisted back horns, so that's how we can tell them apart. Now they do have that dewlap in their mouth as well, and that does help regulate their body temperature, so cooling them down. But going back to these Maasai giraffes here, Maasai giraffes do have a more rough spot pattern on them compared to other types of giraffes. That's how we can tell them apart from those other types of giraffes. And very similar to our fingerprints, each pattern on that giraffe is unique to each individual giraffe and what separates them from others. Very similar to the okapi, they do have that long prehensile tongue, so that just helps them when snacking those long hours of 20 hours a day. So most of their day is consumed with eating. Now they do spend 20 hours a day eating, but only 30 minutes a day sleeping. That's not all at once, it's short naps. Also on the right hand side of the truck, those dark colored animals kind of munching on the grass are called wildebeest. Wildebeest in Dutch Afrikaans does mean wild beast. And they do get the nickname GNU, and they get that nickname because they say it so much. They do tend to travel in really large herds of thousands, and those scent glands on their hooves help with that as well. But over here on the left-hand side of the truck is a tower. So a group of giraffes all together in one area is called a tower. And their tongues are about a foot in length. So they are very, very long, as well as their necks are anywhere between 5 to 6 feet in length. We are going to continue on forward here. I do see some knocked over trees here, so be on the lookout for some elephants. Elephants are known as bulldozers. They tend to bulldoze over trees just like this one over on the right hand side of the truck. This is actually helpful for smaller animals in the savannah because they can use these bulldozed over homes as small homes for those smaller animals. But I do see an African elephant in the very far back corner on the right hand side of the truck here. Now that is a male because he is alone, and males are about 13,000 pounds while the females are 8,000 pounds. I do know a shortcut we can take to hopefully get us a little bit closer to those African elephants. So 20 friends, let's go and see if we can get a little bit closer to that African elephant here. Oh my goodness. Okay, it does look like they closed my shortcut here. Hopefully none of you guys are afraid of bridges, because that does mean that we do have to go over a bridge here in just a moment. But hopefully you guys can at least see that elephant a little bit there. African elephants do occasionally flap those ears back and forth. It acts as a way to cool down their body temperatures. They have pretty thin ears with blood vessels in the middle, so when they flap those ears back and forth, it creates a circulation in their body and lowers their temperatures by several degrees. I'm going to go really, really slow over this bridge. Be on the lookout on the right-hand side because I think we still are going to be able to see this African elephant here on the right-hand side. Okay, looks like we made it over that bridge, thank goodness. Let's continue on forward. I am seeing some red clay here on the right and the left-hand side of the truck just underneath this bridge. Now, African elephants eat red clay to get minerals, kind of like us eating a multivitamin each day. And if you look on the right-hand side, there are some test marks, so fingers crossed. Hopefully that means we'll see some African elephants. Hello, there's an African elephant right here on the left-hand side of the truck. So this right here is a female, a little bit smaller than that male that we saw before. The females do have one of the longest gestation periods, about 22 months long. So just imagine being pregnant for a little under 2 years. That's a very long time. I do not know how they do that. The males will get driven out of the herd in adulthood. They're going to live solo or form bachelor groups with other males. The females do typically hang out with other females and their little ones, which I'm not sure if you're able to see. There is a little one kind of in this corner here. We're going to continue on forward. Keep looking to the left-hand side. Maybe get a better view of that little one here on the left. African elephants do have thousands of muscles alone in their trunks, and they can use those muscles for many different purposes. The first way is going to be to grab hold of food, very similar to a hand or an arm. They'll pick up all that food and place it in their mouth, kind of like that little one is doing, which, by the way, that little one is about 1.5 years, so she's still pretty small, learning how to use that trunk. They can also store a ton of water in their trunks, so very similar to a straw. So if you ever went to a restaurant, sucked water into a straw, and then held the end there with your thumb, that's kind of what they do. They'll hold that water there and splash it on their backs to cool them down, or splash it in their mouths if they're thirsty and want a drink. Now they do perform a dust bathing behavior. This is where they take dust, dirt, or mud, pick it up, and throw it on the backs of their sensitive skin. This kind of acts like nature sunscreen, so it does protect their sensitive skin from the sunlight. Occasionally they will use those trunks to communicate by waving in a certain way, but besides that, most of their communication isn't too low of vibrations for us humans to hear. Beside us on the left-hand side of the truck are some greater flamingos. Greater flamingos are the largest and the palest of the flamingo species, and they don't start off that pink color. They get that pink color from all the shrimp that they enjoy eating. Their beaks are kind of similar to a food strainer. It strains out any additional water in order to get easier access to all of that shrimp. A group of flamingos just like this is called a flamboyance. On the left-hand side of the truck is a large pit of mud. Be on the lookout for some rhinos. Now, rhinos love mud pits just like that. They do have really sensitive skin, kind of similar to the African elephants. And when they wallow in those mud pits, it acts like a sunscreen and a bug repellent all in one. Now, we saw a rhino earlier, so we know just how large they are. They might have moved somewhere else, but with that being there, it's a good indicator that they might be around here somewhere. I do see some ostriches though on the right hand side of the truck. So in between those trees, those are two female ostriches there. You kind of see their neck, the tall of their neck. Ostriches are quite tall. They're anywhere between 6 to 9 feet tall. The males have black feathers with white tips on the end, and the females do have gray feathers, so those were females. And they are flightless birds, but they can run speeds of 40 miles an hour, so they are really, really fast. Unlike other birds, they got 2 toes instead of 3 or 4, so that does help them swiftly run those top speeds of 40 miles an hour. If you do look on top of the hill here on the left-hand side of the truck, kind of hiding underneath these leaves here are some cheetahs. So I'm going to go kind of slow around this corner here. You might be able to see her head there sticking up. Cheetahs are incredibly fast animals. They can run speeds of 60 miles an hour, so 0 to 60 in just 3 seconds. Their claws do not entirely retract, so that does help them with all that traction when running those top speeds. Their tail is helpful for making those sharp left and right hand turns as well. Now, unlike other big cats, they do not communicate in roars. They communicate very similar to a house cat in chirps, purrs, and occasionally some meows. Now, on the right-hand side of the truck, I do see those rhinos. They're kind of hiding out on top of the hill here, underneath those trees, right behind this water buck here. So those rhinos there, they kind of look like rocks. Those are actually white rhinos, and they're about 4,000 to 6,000 pounds. Now, they do have the wider mouth compared to the black rhino we saw before. Now, the wider mouth helps them graze the grass below, while the black rhino has that more triangular shaped mouth, which is helpful for grabbing hold of more leaves and shrubs. As for that water buck right in front of them, water bucks do have a heart-shaped nose and a target bottom, so circle around their bottom. And they do secrete an oil that makes their fur almost waterproof, so that's very beneficial when it's raining or when you're drinking lots and lots of water, which is one of their favorite activities. On the left-hand side of the truck, I do see some warthog burrows here. So all those holes are made from warthogs. So if you see anything running around, most likely is a warthog. They can run speeds of 30 miles an hour. And they have 2 sets of ivory tusks. So ivory being the same as African elephants. So one set is used for burrowing and the other set is used for protecting themselves from predators. If you didn't see the ostriches before, look over on the right-hand side or right about now. You might get a better view of those female ostriches. They're kind of behind this tree stump here in the corner. Speaking of ostriches, I do see some ostrich eggs up ahead here, so you're gonna want to look in the grass, look for large yellow eggs, kind of right before this tree here, in front of that tall grass. Those ostrich eggs are quite durable. That does mean that a human could stand on one of those eggs and they wouldn't break. They are about 3 pounds or 24 chicken eggs, if you want to view it that way. The female ostriches share the nest with other females. However, the more dominant females are going to place their eggs in the middle of the nest. Does look like we're entering the warden's post here. Does not look like the warden's home, but I do see some Nigerian dwarf goats over on the left-hand side of the track. These Nigerian dwarf goats are very playful social animals, and they are domesticated dairy goats, so the warden is getting dairy from all of these goats here. If you do take a look in front of the warden post, there's a yellow structure that's hanging there. One of them is just underneath it right there. Though that is a beehive, and that beehive is really important because African elephants face 3 major threats during their lifetime. That's habitat loss, poaching, and human-elephant conflict. So, a way that the Disney Conservation Fund has helped with human-elephant conflict is by partnering with a project called the Elephants and the Bees Project. And here they did a ton of research and found out that elephants are terrified of bees. So, in order to deter elephants from bulldozing over farmers' crops, they would place beehives like the one we saw back there just outside the fields. Now this is a win-win situation because the elephants remain safe, out of harm's way, and continue on living their lives, while the farmers can make profit off the beehive's honey and any undamaged crops. This does allow the elephant and farmer to live in harmony with one another and eliminates one of the 3 major threats to human-elephant conflict. So if you have any more questions about the Disney Conservation Fund or you're interested in donating to that fund, make sure to find any of the merchandise cast members today during your visit. If you choose to donate, any dollar will be matched by Disney, and not only does it help the Elephants and the Bees Project, it helps many of the animals that we actually saw out on the reserve today, including some of your favorites, allowing them to have a longer lasting life and protect the environments that they do live in. Now friends, we will not be unloading here. We're going to circle back to get all of your things, so please remain seated and I'll get you guys back here shortly.
When are we going to leave? Now, I think.